me. There you go. Okay, we're going to wait for our guest for a couple of more minutes here. I think I see Carol, who does the communications for the Online News Association. So her boss, her new incoming boss, shouldn't be far behind. I'm going to
Niketa's here.
We can go from there. She can only stay for about
Niketa's
half an
on
hour,
here.
so that's why really
Hey, Richard, Niketa's on here already.
Oh, she's there? Okay, good. Yeah, okay, very good. All right, let's get started.
Yeah, we showed up.
Yeah. Great. Okay, welcome to the Journalism's Roundtable. We have Facebook going also, which is great. My name is Richard Prince, and I write an online column called Journal-isms. That's journal-isms.com on diversity issues in the news business. This roundtable is an extension of that. We started the roundtable in 1999 when a friend of ours was leaving to pursue a doctorate. She said, keep these going. We met every month in various restaurants in Washington, D.C. until the COVID pandemic, when we switched to Zoom. Our participation multiplied, and we hope to have more roundtables that are hybrid, meeting in person, as well as having people attend via Zoom. We just had one of those last month, and I want to thank the Newhouse School in DC for playing host to it. Special welcome to those on Facebook. Please leave messages in the comments section if you want to reach us. Our topic tonight is how journalists can survive and thrive in this culture of the internet. Every day there's another announcement about where there's parallel announcements. Actually, we just had another one today with Chicago Sun-Times announcing a round of buyouts, and also the Philadelphia Inquirer closing the communities and something else desk because finances. On the other hand, more and more people are starting Substack accounts and YouTube accounts and all kinds of other kinds of social media, and many of them are thriving. And so the purpose of this roundtable is to explore how can we thrive too, those of us who aren't in that. So before we do that, I want to start off by introducing and raising a toast to the new CEO of the Online News Association. Some of you may remember that Irving Washington was a regular when he was the president, and we've gone through a couple of more since Irving. And we wish them well. And so Niketa Patel is here, as well as her associate who does communications, Carol Robarison. I would pronounce it correctly. And we want to raise a glass to both of them on their success and success to the new leadership of the ONA. Hear, hear.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Here. And now we want to ask you, that's very nice. now that you haven't started yet, but and you listed some of the plans that you have, but tell the rest of us who have not seen that. What are your goals for being? Well, first of all, what is the ONA, and what are your goals for moving it forward?
Oh, well, first of all, I want to say hello to everyone, and thank you so much for welcoming me today. I'm really, really excited to be here and thrilled that this community exists. And so, of course, this is amazing. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and some new faces too. So if you haven't heard of ONA, it's basically the Online News Association, and we are one of the largest groups out there dedicated to training digital journalists and making sure that digital journalists have a support network. We host a series of virtual events, in-person events. We have a number of amazing programs too. The Women's Leadership Accelerator. We have AI programs happening. Many, many different initiatives to support journalists through all stages of their career. And so, I'm just thrilled that My new role starts on Monday, so this is a week of fun employment for me before I take the role on officially. I'll be at ISOJ in Austin. If anyone is
You may
going,
not know about ISOJ, so explain that one.
there we go. If anyone's going, let me know. We can meet there. But yeah, in terms
That's
of
what does ISOJ stand for? It's the International what?
Symposium of Online Journalism.
Right, right. Okay.
So yeah, so it's basically ISOJ is like the little sibling to ONA. That's kind of how we work with Rosenthal on the cadence of conferences and whatnot. But yeah, we have big plans for ONA. I'm going to obviously be easing into the role very slowly, but making sure that we have the best programs out there, that we're really thinking about challenges, but turning challenges that we're facing in this moment, right? As you mentioned, AI, there are a lot of different headwinds in terms of the business side of things. And as we think about new opportunities, right? I'm all about turning challenges into opportunities. And so that is kind of my mindset coming into this role. And I think that as an industry, we have so many opportunities to make sure that journalists are seen and heard, protected and cared for, and then that we're assisting different journalists in their career journeys as well. So I'll have a lot more to say on that coming soon, but just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and please do join us in September for ONA 25. It's going to be in New Orleans, so it's going to be wonderful. And I hope to see you all there.
Here, here. Well, thank you. I know you have to go, but anybody have any questions before for Niketa before she departs? No? Okay. All right. Well, that's good. You explained everything to everyone's satisfaction. Thank you. We wish you the best, and do come back. Okay, good. All right. Now we're going to move on to the main part of the program, which is the subject of the question after the answer to how do journalists survive in this new climate of social media and social media influences, and people piling up thousands of followers and many members of the public paying more attention to what's said on social media than they do to what the traditional legacy media is producing that's been fact checked and all that other good stuff. So I want to ask, we have, I think, 4 panelists. I want to ask each one of them to respond to the question for no longer than 3 minutes to get things started. How can journalists survive and thrive in this new environment of social media and social media influences? How about Meredith Clark? I see you, Meredith, somewhere. There you are. She wrote the book about Black Twitter, which lots of people know about. So Meredith, take it away.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Richard, thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Of course, we call on the egghead professor first to answer this question about how people are out in the field and surviving. So as I tell my students all the time, consider the source. I'm reporting safely from as safe as one can be in these days and times, academia. But was a journalist before making the move into the ivory tower. And so things that I'm thinking about right now with journalists and surviving, and basically how we do that at this time, is one, separating the difference between being a person who does a specific job and then someone who has a specific title. And I think it's very important in the era of social media news influence that people recognize how significant it is to be able to port your work from one platform to another and to be able to position yourself so that your following migrates with you. In the era in which I was working in the newsroom, the thing that we were always told is that you were not the story. And that remains true, but now in an era of what we would call news influencers, those people who hop on social media, generally aggregate content from around the web, whether it is traditionally reported media, verified, fact-checked, or if it's gossip and a mix of gossip and gossip blogs, or even bringing in some of the research that they're doing on their own that may come from a number of different sources, whether that's peer-reviewed sources or other opinion works that are being published on different platforms, individuals are looking to those people for a very specific reason. So some of the research that I conducted along with my colleagues, Dean Freelon, Lori Lopez, Sarah Jackson, a few years ago, we focused on how Black Twitter, feminist Twitter, and Asian American Twitter were all interacting with news media. And a couple of the key takeaways were that people wanted the journalists that they were going to turn to be more personable. So they wanted to know, they wanted to hear directly from people about their experience in actually doing the work of journalism, what it was like for them to report their stories, what they were seeing in the field, sort of bringing in some of those elements that we saw from people who were giving us their live stream from, say, Ferguson or Staten Island, any of these places where we had protests during the movement for Black Lives. They wanted that same sort of personal feel. And we know that, as I mentioned earlier, we're taught in J School, we're taught by some of our I guess, mentors in the field that we're not supposed to be the focus. And that still remains true, but there is a way that someone can be personable and still deliver the information that people are looking for. And it's that bond that people feel with someone that makes them follow a specific journalist or news influencer or pundit from place to place to place. So I know that I can follow, I used to see Joy Reid on MSNBC. I know she has a podcast with Jackie Reed. I know I can find her on social media. Like, I'm not necessarily paying attention to the network that she's on. I'm paying attention to what it is about her delivery and the way that she connects with the audience. And that is what people are following from place to place to place. So I think as we talk about people making themselves, threat proof to the extent that you can be, one of the most important things to pay attention to is the ability for people to connect with you across platforms and really connect with the individual, their style of delivery with the news, and to be able to know where that person is going, how they can follow them, and how they can interact with them.
Okay, thank you. Good introduction. Adriana Lacy is with us also. She spent more than a decade working in audience engagement, including working at the New York Times and Axios, and now heads her own consulting agency to help newsrooms adopt the best practices of what they call creator journalism. So Adriana, your 3 minutes, please, on what we all need to know about thriving on the internet.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I definitely echo the sentiments that Dr. Clark just shared. I also don't work in a newsroom, so I am saying all of this kind of from a window. But something that I've been really thinking about is really how to elevate reporters to kind of that same influencer status, not necessarily for the fame and for the hype, but really for the connection. Something that I've been doing this past few months is I started a website called influencerjournalism.com. And basically I'm working with newsrooms to really figure out what their social video strategy looks like, what their audience engagement strategy looks like, so that they can start to make videos, make content to connect with the audiences online. I think we're seeing so many people sharing things online that are, not verified, things that are commentary. And I think there's a really great chance right now for newsrooms to really reclaim that. I've been working with a lot of newsrooms to just get them comfortable in front of a camera, get comfortable sharing that information, and really become those trusted messengers in their communities. I think something else that's really important with all of this too is just, having your own brand as a journalist in this age, I think is really important. We've seen how unstable this industry is. We've seen layoff after layoff these past few months and years. And I think it's so important to make sure that, as an individual journalist, you have something to fall back on, even if you're not ready today to start your own Substack or go out on your own. I think having a foundation for that, if you want to do that or you need to do that one day, is really vital. So that's something that I'm really working on right now, is just figuring out how we can equip journalists to start to do this work, start to lay the groundwork, and then for newsrooms that want to explore this, getting them in a good place to create social video. I've been creating some social video with newsrooms, kind of working with reporters, getting them comfortable, and also matching them with influencers. Sometimes we see that an influencer might have a really strong audience on a particular topic, like abortion or voting rights, and being able to do some sort of collaborative post or video with them is a really great way to share more and more information and increase your audiences with us. So I've been working on this for a few months, and I've seen some really great results so far, and really kind of excited to see how we can really just continue to build those connections between journalists and the public.
What's the most important thing that journalists should keep in mind when they want to attempt this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, to keep in mind is just to understand that it doesn't need to be perfect. I've been working with a lot of people who are like, I want to do this, but I'm so nervous. Like, what if it doesn't work? And I was actually talking with a creator. She has probably 5 million followers across all of her platforms. And she said, when I started, my videos were getting 5 views, and it took years to build this. So I think just starting it, experimenting, seeing what works is something that works really well. You don't need to have super slick graphics and super high-tech video to do this. I think just talking about what's going on, being honest, being authentic, sharing verified information is really all you need to get started.
All right, thank you. Okay, next we have Phil Lewis. I thought I saw you earlier. You must be on the second screen. Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good. Good to see you, Phil. All right.
Hey.
Phil is deputy editor at HuffPost, news aggregator, and president of the Washington Association of Black Journalists. And last week, E&P, editor and publisher, named him one of the 25 most people on the move who are younger than, what was the cutoff age? 35?
35.
40, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
To watch and to keep an eye on. And we're very happy to see you on that list. Put a poll in there. So Phil, question to you, 3 minutes. How can traditional journalists survive and thrive in this new era of social media?
Well, I'm really happy to be here with you all. I'm sad that I had to go after such really great folks. No, because they obviously they have really great insights. I think that it's important. I mean, I am working in a newsroom right now, and some things I think that's just really important to know is that social media is just like, it's not your friend. And I think we've known this since maybe 2017 or whenever the algorithm changed. For the most part, I was over at Mike.com when, if anybody's, I don't even know if anybody's familiar with Mike.com anymore, but before, when we were there, we were experimenting with Facebook Live and doing a lot of things with Facebook. And then when they changed the algorithm, everything just dropped. I mean, the numbers crashed, people started getting laid off, and it was just really, blast from the past, exactly. So I think when I hear about these conversations, I always try to push back against the idea that people might be surviving, but I don't know if they're necessarily thriving quite yet. I don't know if thriving is quite the right word, depending on what you're trying to do. I think when I do think of people who are thriving, I'm thinking about very niche outlets, and I think we're in this era of nicheness. Is that a word? Nicheness. So it's fine. I'll make it a word today. So we're in this era, and I think about outlets like the Ankler or Puck News or Platformer. These are folks who, in some cases, they've already had resources. In some cases, they didn't, but they have left what we would call traditional media, and they are creating their own platforms on Substack and other sorts of places. And I think what's interesting about them is that they have decided that they're not going to try to capture a broad audience like the BuzzFeeds of the world, or like Vice or places like that. Rather, they're experimenting with very niche audiences. They know exactly who they're trying to reach, and I think that's where we're headed. People are already, we've already talked about sort of influencers, and I don't want to restate information about that, because I think it is super important to sort of build your brand online. But I think when we are thinking about building our brands, quote unquote, people tend to think like, okay, I need 100,000 followers to do whatever it is that I need to do. And not necessarily. I mean, there are Substack accounts right now who have very, very niche audiences of, I don't know, let's say 500 subscribers, and maybe 200 of them are paid or something like that. That's surviving, but is that thriving? I don't think it's thriving. But it depends on what it is that you're looking to do. So social media, I think we need to sort of maybe reframe the conversation away from social media. And it's awkward for me to say because I love social media. I was molded by social media as a journalist. But what I've noticed is that people have been going back to emails. People have been going back to front pages, right? Like our front page at HuffPost is extremely popular right now because it's a platform that people are familiar with and people know about. And social media is a place that, you know, necessarily people aren't even looking toward anymore because of all the changes and the things that have happened. So that's why I created my own Substack. I want people's emails. Like you might not even be able to see my tweets anymore because of Elon Musk, right? So I created it because I want that direct connection with people's emails, and I can just cut out the social media middleman, I guess you could say. So those are my like rapid fire thoughts about where we are.
Okay, thanks. But don't forget, when you say just people going after niche audience, don't forget that Charlemagne the God and Roland Martin and these people who do have, you know, gobs and gobs of followers. They're not thinking about niche.
Well, that's because Roland and Charlemagne, these are people, but everybody can't be that, right? And I think it's important for us to consider reality for like where we are. I don't think everybody can sort of build that audience, and they've been doing this for a long time, Roland and Charlemagne. But how we do it, how we try to build our audiences now, it's even more difficult because of the way social media is and the way we just gather information now. It just looks so different now than even when let's say when they first started.
Okay, we'll have to expand on that when we go into the journal.
Sure.
I want to ask Samantha Ragland, who is Vice President for Journalism Program at the American Press Institute, journalist, educator, and digital strategist. So, Sam, you've been taking all this in. What is your 3-minute take on the question on the table?
Yeah, I love this question. I think this is great. And this may feel like an echo of what we've already heard, but I think the question on survival and thriving is twofold for journalists today. And I think that is true for digital journalists. I think it is true for legacy journalists. I don't think it really matters your discipline and where you land on on whatever side of the coin. We're talking about an internal survival and level of thriving, and we're talking about an external level of surviving and thriving. And when I think about internal survival for journalists, period, but at API, we focus on local and community-centered media, right? And so what I think a lot about is the fact that we are living in an age of social isolation. I think about like what Dr. Clark just mentioned about connection and people following people from one place to another. I think that is very much speaking to our post-pandemic culture where there is so much siloing and so much disconnection that we were in a state of really interesting isolation and despair. And so being in front of your byline is really important, but it also means that internally for a journalist to feel that they are thriving, they need to have connections themselves, and we don't need a ton of them, right? We need really high quality connections across our newsroom. We also need them in our community, right? And so when we're thinking about how we're thriving, we're talking about how we're holding boundaries, how we're modeling healthy relationships with work. We're talking about how we're able and enabling others to choose stories that don't just take out of them without pouring back into them, right? How are we constantly thinking about refilling our reporters' resilience, our editors and our managers, their resilience? Because guess what? Like being a journalist in the digital age, it blows sometimes. Like it is a hard job. There are many hazards of this job. It's difficult work to do. And so if we want to survive and even shift into thriving, we have to think first about ourselves as journalists. And that being a journalist is a part of our intersectional identities, I think, as opposed to a singular identity there, right? The second thing is this kind of external opportunity to not just survive, but to thrive. And what we think and talk a lot about at API is the fact that with digital media and with influencers or news influencers or digital creators or trusted messengers, as we lovingly call them, we think about the power of connection. We think about the importance of collaboration, that a journalist in a news organization does not need to have a monopoly on story ideas and on opportunities to engage, but instead co-creating that with community is a critical part of our survival and a critical part of the way that we can thrive in the work that we're doing. We talk a lot about journalists as conveners. Your job is to report. Your job is to source. Your job is to disarm. Your job is to meet people at the worst days of their life. Your job is to write and edit and script and all of these things. But your job is also to convene people, because we aren't the only ones living in an age of social isolation. Our communities are living in those ages too. And if we aim to thrive, in order to do that, we really do have to step in front of our byline, which means that the value in the way that we are measuring the work that we're doing as journalists will also need to change. So when you're talking about top of funnel opportunity, we need to think a bit bigger than that. Sending reporters out to cover a story or sending reporters into the field to have coffee. Go and just have coffee. Don't bring back a story. Go and be a community member, be a neighbor, and let that simmer in that, right? So we talk a lot about community engagement. And when we think about the influencers that you're talking about on this call today, at API, we believe that those are deep funnel community engagement opportunities. And when a journalist can unlock that, versus thinking that this is a one-stop shop to solving the business problem of journalism, right? When it can be community engagement, which increases capacity, which increases trust, which creates connection, then we're unlocking something I think that's really magical, and I think critical to not just the survival of journalists as people, but their ability to pour in and refill and pour in and pour out again.
Okay. This whole business of getting out in the community and interacting with people and all, it has been around since the very beginning of journalism, particularly for people of color. And I wonder how that is different with social media. I mean, it's our jobs as journalists. And I know that the financial condition of many news organizations doesn't make it as possible as we would like. But isn't that part of being a journalist in the first place, getting out there with the people and developing those bonds and the trust?
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? But for many newsrooms, the how do I say, the demands of the byline turn make it really, really difficult to go into the community and actually create relationship. And so there are touch points. We are quote unquote developing sources, but we're developing them for a story, and then we're moving on. And then we're going back to them because we have another story, right? And so when we're talking about the work that we're doing in community, you're either going to be doing transactional work or transformational and relational work. And what I'm talking about is the level of relational work necessary that's going to actually build the trust, which means going into the field and not necessarily bringing a story back.
Exactly. If we have the time and the resources and the goodwill of the boss to be able to do that, that's good. Okay, so those are our introductory comments. Anyone have any questions for any of these speakers, these panelists?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been in newsrooms, I suppose, for 40 of my 61 years in journalism. And this wave is very interesting. But I remember sitting down talking to Bob Johnson when he was starting BET, that there had to be something that we owned that was just different. And I was wondering, maybe you've talked about it, but a couple of new kinds of entities that we can build, not just one person have their Black thing and the other person have their Black thing. But maybe Black online, maybe I'm hearing at where we can make it big, you know, own it, and then not apologize. You know, if this is Black online, we're gonna talk about Blacks for Blacks, because we're gonna have to come up with some new kinds of things, because I don't see us going back into the journalism that I was a part of all those years. It's we can see it's changing. So there'll be some of you, but what can we create that's just new, that we isn't, it will not be, you know, divided, this a little piece here, a little piece here, but something like BET, but not I don't agree with what they did, but I agree with what the concept was.
Okay, who wants to answer that one?
There's been an effort to do something similar. I believe through Word in Black. Word in Black was one of those platforms. It's a platform of 10 publishers, like the Afro, the Houston,
Amsterdam News.
Amsterdam News. There's 10 Black-owned newspapers that are involved with it. So there are things that are coming about that are like this. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any outside of Word in Black, but I do know that there are a bunch of worker-owned outlets that are popping up kind of all over the place, like Hellgate, Aftermath, Defector. These newsrooms are popping up all over the place, and I sometimes am asking the same question that you have, Barbara. Like, I'm wondering, like, what would it take for a Black-owned sort of outlet like that? It's owned by workers. It's not owned by Jeff Bezos. It's not owned by the guy over at the Times, at the Los Angeles Times, right? It's owned by the workers, and so there are examples of these places that exist. But I don't know off the top of my head if there's something
I think
in place
that's what
ready.
we need, and hopefully we'll come together, you know, about community and unity in the community, not your thing, his thing, my thing, but that big thing, another X, or not talking about what it does, but that kind of thing that we can put together that can be trustworthy, can be informative, and something to know that when we're on a Titanic and we see it sinking, that we maybe better get off and do something different. That's what I'm trying to say. Hopefully.
Well, we have our journalism associations and organizations.
Oh, I know.
I know.
And this is why we're here.
Right.
This is why we can discuss it. But
right.
I'm saying, you know, a particular thing that does nothing but the news online, something like X or MNSBC or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, we do a wonderful job of what we're doing, but I'm talking about we have to create our own line news platform. Now, maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yes.
Remember in the beginning of the internet, there was what's it? Omar Wasow had one of the first interactive. I think it was called Black something.
Black Planet.
What is it?
Black Planet.
Right, Black Planet, exactly. That went by the wayside, but I think he was thinking along the same lines that you're talking about, Barbara. Right. All right, ER Ship has her hand up.
Hi, everybody. I had a few thoughts, but as you were talking, I was trying to think, and I was writing stuff here in the chat. Fan base is something that various people have mentioned to me, is a Black-owned new social media platform. Anybody know anything about that?
I've heard of it.
Has anyone experienced it yet? I haven't yet, but I'm going to be looking at a lot of things now. People have been talking about Blue Sky. I haven't done anything with that yet either, but those are some possibilities. The real thing I wanted to say, two real things I wanted to say. Another platform out there is NABJ's Black News and Views. That's been around now for a couple of years. And I had a question sort of aimed at, I guess, Adriana. I'm intrigued about old fogies like myself who are experts in topics that other people can benefit from. Can you say more about collaborating with influencers? What that looks like? Are there any examples you can share?
Yeah, for sure. I will also shout out Sam, who has done a lot of this work and has some really great examples to share as well. But I can speak to just some of the, processes that I've seen that work really well. I think one great thing about influencers and, people who are sharing information is that there's so many different audiences that are interested in this content. And we see influencers of all ages, stripes. And I think there's a really good opportunity for that. I just am working on right now pairing an influencer with a newsroom to kind of do some work on education. This person is a very big education influencer, and this newsroom writes all about education. And they're launching a new guide, and they figured the best way to get to the audience they want to reach is by working with this educational influencer. So they're working together on creating some social media videos that they can hopefully get people to be aware of this resource that they're creating and sharing. So I've seen models like that. I've seen newsrooms, use a influencer to promote something. I've seen an influencer help report a story out. So being really, really involved with it. And I've also just seen people who are journalists sort of become their own influencer and just share their work themselves. So I think there's lots of different avenues to do it. And I've definitely seen lots of really great pilots going on. And I know API is doing some more of that work. I don't know if you have anything, Sam, like volunteering.
Yeah, Sam, what do you say?
Yeah, no, I agree. And Adriana shared a lot of really good ones. We're launching a second influencer learning cohort, where 12 news organizations will join API to kind of learn out loud on what collaborating with influencers look like. But as you asked your question, I was listening to Adriana's reply. It reminded me of some influencer work that we did before they were ever called influencers when I was at the Palm Beach Post. And we had an award-winning financial reporter who specialized in insurance claims and insurance fraud, in South Florida, right? Charles Elmore was amazing. And like when we were still programming Snapchat, he became an influencer, very much so for our Snapchat account. We didn't have a lot of people on there. It was maybe 2,700 folks. But in the midst of all of his print reporting that he was doing, he partnered with our social media reporter to storyboard out and create a multi-part series. We featured his financial consulting to our Snapchat account. He got people out of debt. He helped them learn why Verizon wasn't the best cell phone for them, like the cell phone company. He did all kinds of stuff. And when we would ask people on our Snapchat account, what programming do you want more of from the Palm Beach Post? People wanted Charles, y'all. He won like Innovator of the Year for this special series that we did. And the reason why is because he was like this dad that everybody could trust, right? And he was teaching them things, and he was storyboarding all of these really awesome. He was using every level of intricacy within Snapchat, from the filters and the different, just all kinds of stuff, right? And he never downloaded the app, by the way. He worked directly with the social media reporter on my team. And so to answer your question, specifically, ER, I think that if you are in a local newsroom or in any newsroom, and you feel that you have experience worth cultivating and sharing with a larger audience, then this really is a great time to do that, because any level of information can be translated if you are just willing to work with the right person and get in front of the camera, right? Like, you can do this, and I think that your newsrooms can help you figure out the best way too. I mean, if you want to equate it to something that we're all very familiar with, you can think about whether it's traditional columnist, right, in your print paper, and how you kind of become a columnist. You become a specialist in a topic, you have opinions, you know how to write, you know how to report, but you sit in a lane, right? You're the feature, you're the culture columnist or the humor columnist, right? And now we're talking about doing that, but do it on TikTok. And what can that look like, and what can that feel like? Well, it can actually look and feel very, very good if you can figure out your own office style way of doing this type of reporting and sharing, office style, in that anybody who's doing really strong influencer style or creator style journalism knows how to break the fourth wall. They know how to make it feel like you're not talking to a phone and you're not being listened to through a device, right? And I would imagine that most people in this room, if given a chance and a couple of opportunities to make mistakes within the comfort of their own newsroom, you all would be pretty exceptional.
I have four hands here: Carol Rock Robertson, Karen Berry, Miranda Spivak, and Elliot Francis. in that order. Carol.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. So back to the point about platforms and algorithms being so fleeting, like we know this. I'm wondering, for the journalists who have made the leap to build their, more of an influencer platform, are they talking about longevity and strategy beyond a specific platform? And like, what do those conversations look like right now in March 2025? I'm very curious if somebody could take us behind the scenes.
Okay. Who's going to respond?
I can hop in.
Okay.
I will say there is a lot of fear. I think that starting your own thing is very hard to do. I think what we saw when Substack started, when Beehive started, there were these cohorts and programs where these tech companies were giving people lots of money and resources to do this work. And a lot of those programs have shut down. Substack is not paying as many creators as they used to. Beehive just started something, but a lot of these events are fleeting. And I know a lot of folks who are creators who have newsletters who are worried about what next year looks like. I think sometimes it can be great to get a subscriber for a year, but when the renewal comes up every month, when you get a new bill, I think people are considering canceling. I think that these people are not immune from the economy and what's happening. So I do see a lot of fear. A lot of folks I know who have started their own thing are exploring ways to increase their freelancing, do some part-time work. So I think that there is a lot of dollars and cents to make it work that I think more and more people are starting to be more transparent about. And I think it's important that we continue to discuss.
Yeah, that's right. I'll share into the chat the State of Create report that published a little bit earlier this year. That'll give you a lot of really, really fascinating data based on the creators and their interpretations of what's happening and their fans. But a couple of really interesting data points include how hard it is, like Adriana mentions, to make a living. It's one of the first things that our cohort of newsrooms learned in doing their first influencer experiments through the election last year, that influencers are beholden to the algorithm as much as a news organization is, right? And so if you're only going to get your 1% to 2%, hopefully, if you're lucky, right? Like, who even is that, right? And now you talk about it from our perspective of local news folks, and it's like, well, a national level influencer doesn't make sense when you're sharing local stories, because you're even going to get a smaller percent of the 1% who even lives in the community that would care about the issue, right? And so, but really, really great data here and a lot of hope. I think one of the things that you'll also find is that the people who pay creators to continue to do their work, they would prefer to pay for long-term work versus like long-form work versus short-form work, and yet their feeds and the algorithm are geared towards short-form work, and so they're not seeing the long-form work that would deem it valuable enough to be paying for in the future. We experience that too in news, and one of the benefits that we have on being on the news side is we learned long ago, as Philip mentioned, like we need like emails, we need phone numbers, we need addresses, right? And so we own a level of data that a lot of creators haven't even begun to start to mine for, ask for, and get.
Okay,
yeah, I'm glad. I just want to say really quick that I'm glad. I'm glad that they both said that, because this goes back to the idea that people are surviving and not necessarily thriving. If you already, it feels in a lot of ways, it feels like you already have to be like Jim Acosta, right? To really thrive you have to bring your platform over to a place like Substack to really see a lot of the results. You know, when we think about, okay, this is somebody who's thriving. Well, yes, somebody like Jim Acosta is thriving on there, and Substack and a lot of these places are they tend to make that known, because they tend to boost and uplift people that they already believe to be sort of superstars on Substack. And so it can be difficult if you are creating your own thing from scratch. You're literally creating it from scratch. Like you might not necessarily receive the same support as other figures who have established sort of brand names on that platform or other platforms.
Okay. All right, Karen Berry.
Well, I'm glad Philip said something, because aren't you the one that popped up on my X feed a couple of years ago when I was working for Anscape with news stories? Are you that Philip Lewis?
Probably. Yes. Yeah.
Unsolicited, he just popped up. And somebody even mentioned in the news meeting, yeah, he's the hardest working brother in journalism. And I get stuff from him first. And this was like 3 years ago. So shout out
Just
to
go ahead and
Philip.
you can blame Elon for me being in your
Uh,
unsolicited.
yeah, I was like, who's he? And I was like, and when she mentioned it, I was like, hey, wait a minute. He follows me too. All right.
There we
So
go.
actually my two questions are related to what Philip brought up. One, when you say influencers influence and journalists report, what is are you creating something different when you start working to craft your stories from an influencer perspective? And a journalist might not be comfortable with asserting a point of view, because that's what influencers do. My second question is about longevity, and what people have been saying in the last couple of minutes is, it's hard to make a living, and we got to eat, and we have to pay rent, and we want to make good money. So what I've noticed is that the platforms in this week, next week, it's old news. I'm not into it anymore. I'm after this next shiny thing. So that doesn't really help as far as sustaining a long-term career where you're making a living, which is what we all wanted to do. So how does a journalist differentiate herself in that atmosphere of platforms and influencers who are in and out? And it's also part of the culture. People, younger people expect that they're going to see something else new and different, and they're willing to follow that. So it's just the way it is. So anybody who wants, any of the four panelists who want to respond, could you respond to my two questions? No? Scared?
Well, because I think that's a really important question. Like, I mean, we all want to figure out how we need to how we want to eat, right? Like that's the most important thing. As somebody who, well, I think I'll talk to your first question. So for WWJ, what I've been trying to do is reach out to these to news influencers, right? Because they are doing journalistic type of work, right? Like they have audiences, they are providing people with information that people want to know, and so I, in my opinion, I don't necessarily see it as a battle. Sometimes I think newsrooms do themselves a disservice when they, for example, like when a newsroom decides to choose a influencer to cover the red carpet, right, over a journalist. I think that's maybe not great, but I think that there are situations where news influencers and journalists can actually work together. And so for WWJ, I've been trying to reach out to news influencers that are in DC who have these large platforms, and maybe there are ways that we can all work together. Maybe we can teach them about some journalism techniques. Maybe they can teach us about brand building. So trying to figure out how we can come together and work together is something that we're trying to do over at WWJ. And yeah, I don't know. There's so much to say about news influencers. Meredith, I'm gonna tag you in because I want to know what you got to say.
I really quickly, I just want to go back to some of the problems that we had, honestly, in the days of the digital transition. So out of print and into the digital, where folks on the journalism side really were focused and almost pedantic, if you will, about what we called certain people, like what labels do we apply to certain people. And I think if there's any takeaway from everything that has happened in the last 30 years with the digital and how it has evolved, is that you've got to be ready to let go of the label and focus on what the actual function is. News influencers, like when we use the term influencers, it did originate in talking about getting people to buy certain things first, right? We were talking about commerce. So I'm going to influence you to purchase a particular product, to emulate my lifestyle. And then we got into folks who were political influencers to get you to pay attention to particular candidates and to issues and the way that those issues were being discussed. And now we're talking about news influencers. By and large, these are individuals who are presenting news from a particular viewpoint, which we would have called them, say, columnists or opinion writers or editorial writers back in the day. But these individuals cover a lot. They often cover it from a very specific perspective. The Pew Research Center's work on this shows that most of the news influencers that they considered in their analysis are Republican aligned, more conservative aligned. They are overwhelmingly men. But the function of any kind of influencer is to get you to take a specific action. So that action might be to follow that influencer on particular platforms. It might be to pay attention to a specific issue and to see it with a certain frame. It might be to get you to take a particular action in terms of buying something. With news influencers, what people are trying to get you to do is to pay attention to them so that they can get those subscription dollars. That's ultimately the bottom line. So they look for a niche to fill. And to the point that we talked about niches earlier and where folks are, I was looking at this Zoom earlier and thinking about all of you folks who have all of this wisdom, so many years in the newsroom, and thinking about really underserved communities and digital spaces. When you talk about older Americans who are on these digital platforms, very few people are talking to older folks about the news and how it relates specifically to them and like translating that. That is a huge gap. So a news influencer could be someone who says, I'm going to be your trusted friend, not your Walter Cronkite. Maybe I'll be your Ed Bradley. Maybe I'll be someone, of the Charlene Hunter Galt era who can help you navigate what's going on in the news now at a speed and in a context that works for you. That's the sort of thing that a news influencer would do now, and they don't necessarily have to take a specific opinion in that, but they do need to be able to engage in ways that are fairly provocative, that can get attention. As was mentioned earlier, I think Sam mentioned this, being able to break that fourth wall and do some of those techniques that really bring people in so they understand conversation and feel like they have a relationship with a person on the other side of the screen.
Quick question, Meredith. So it sounds to me that then those people would be only have like a role in the newsroom. This would not be something that would rule the newsroom.
Yeah, I think of this totally outside of the newsroom, and I'll be brief. Influencers, the ones who are successful, to Phil's point earlier about Substack elevating certain creators, those people are influential no matter where they go. They may have come into prominence within a specific newsroom, but what they control, when we say that they control those emails and they have that data from people, they take that from place to place. There have been federal lawsuits about whether you can take your subscriber list from place to place, where folks have gotten laid off and they have taken their mailing list of thousands and tens of thousands of people, and an organization knows that's our audience and you're running off with them. So you can be separate of a newsroom. It helps for building prominence and for being able to tap into resources that allow you to build that audience. But it is well within the possibility of someone being out on their own and doing this kind of work. One of the examples that I think of is Under the Desk News and how people are paying attention to, and I can't remember the name of who runs Under the Desk News, but that person, because they're so good at delivering directly to individuals. They're not connected to like a legacy newsroom or anything like that. They are just out there making the content and getting people to pay attention to them in specific.
Okay, Miranda Spivak. I think you have to
Okay.
unmute.
Hi, yes. Um,
Congratulations
Richard.
on your new book.
No, thank you very much.
Yes.
I had a great review, I will tell you, in Publishers Weekly, so I will shamelessly self-promote that to this group. My question is, and maybe this is for Sam, but maybe it's for everybody. When you are combining or linking up an influencer and a newsroom, how is that influencer being vetted? As in for accuracy, for ethical behavior, for things that still do matter in newsrooms?
Yeah, I mean, it all still matters. It was one of the biggest learnings from the cohort, in fact, that they didn't take enough time to find the influencer that had the greatest alignment across, especially the values that they displayed and a couple of other parameters. And so they are being vetted. And there are a couple of things that people are looking out for, but we have an entire article. I'll drop it in the chat for you all that are, it's basically red flags, pump the brakes, do not proceed with this influencer collaboration. There are yellow flags, like put your ears up, you need to be on alert, but maybe it'll be all right. And then there are green flags, like full steam ahead, right? Like this could be really cool for you. And a couple of those things include like how often does this trusted messenger influencer delete content or delete comments from their account, something that like we would never do in journalism, right? How often do they cite sources, or are they caught kind of regramming and never kind of sharing where the original author and reporting came from? These are partners that you maybe don't want to work with because the parameters that you would put around the collaboration are so far outside of their realm or what they think is necessary that it would make for a more tense and unhelpful collaboration, right? And so we give a whole list of things that we want people to look for. What we have also found is that partnership across, again, like this is such a great and important conversation. And I come from such an interesting perspective because we are really, really focused on what Adriana and others would call like the nano influencer and below, right? Like nano influencers are like, Adriana, correct me if I'm wrong, is that 100,000 followers or fewer, or 10,000 followers and fewer?
Yeah, 100,000 below,
It's
and
so
then even
tiny.
micro. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so we're going like so far down in our work. We want local and community newsrooms to partner with trusted messengers of like 5,000 followers or less. We really champion people doing these collaborations with folks who have 500, to Philip's point earlier, or 1,200 followers. And we know that because of the intimate engagement, the geographic proximity to the newsroom who is serving those followers and that audience, that there is a greater likelihood of impact and engagement when partnering with that influencer, right? And so we're thinking small in this way, and very much by design and intentionally. One of the things that helps us with, though, is finding that values alignment, right? Because if we're talking about influencers that literally could be our neighbor, and they are experiencing the same like trash can problem that we are, right? Like on the street or whatever the case is, there's just a greater values alignment that can be more quickly, more easy to see. We also have found that these partnerships are especially helpful in this creator economy because there is no longer this need to be the only person coming up with the idea. And there's an opportunity for a critical feedback loop on the work, which doesn't always happen in the creator economy when they are a solopreneur, right? And so when we're talking about how to grow up in the work, beyond trial by fire, well, you do that by having an awesome editor. You do that by having eyes on work before it publishes, all of those things, right? Which can be really, really hard to do when you are a solo show, right? So lots of cool things. But Miranda, I will drop that link for you in the chat so that you can see all the different ethical parameters. We partner with Trusting News on that work, and it's very, very good.
All right, Elliot Francis.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Richard. More so than a question, I just wanted to offer some advice, if I may be so bold. To qualify it, let me just say that I've been working in this space since, 1997, back when I was vice president of content for the old digital portal Net Noir, which was a precursor of Black Planet, if you recall. And so in that time up till now, I've had a lot of opportunity to talk with people much younger than myself or most people in this discussion today about where this was coming from and how it was growing and how to grow it. Because back then, the precursors were bulletin boards and news groups, and it grew to be what we know it to be today. But the basic rules have somehow always been the same. And although each person I talked to would always tell me, look, there's no secret sauce, there's no magic bullet. Everyone is different. But there are two things that you got to do before you monetize it, and you can monetize it on most. You can make money on most platforms these days. You know that. But somebody asked earlier, I think it was Karen, how do I make money? Well, before you do that, you've got to get that following. I think you know that as well. Well, how do I get the following? And the one consistent thing I've always heard was that word, be consistent. So if you choose to do something and you choose a platform to do it on, do it regularly at a regular time. Pick a time, pick a day. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every other day. It could be once a week. It could be once a month. But pick a schedule and stick with it. Because if you're not Don Lemon, if you're not Roland Martin and come in with an established tent with a lot of people under the tent, you're going to have to build that following. The best way to do it is to be consistent. Nobody really knew who Joe Rogan was before he came in and did the podcast. And the same is true for many other, the Midas Touch, who we heard just outshone Joe Rogan in terms of downloads and followers. They came out of nowhere. You think they came out of nowhere, but they've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years consistently, every single day, almost at the same time. So again, I think the best advice is that to be consistent. And I know that for a fact because the platform that we have now, which has been around since about 2017, we have suffered in terms of viewers and followers, and we know that it is our own fault. We've experimented with a lot of platforms. We've gone back and forth. We moved from the East Coast to the West Coast 2 years ago. That created a disruption, and so it showed in the numbers of people who would follow us on a regular basis. So be consistent. The other note is that our fearless leader right here, Richard Prince, is a good example of that. How long has he been consistent with journalisms? And it shows. It shows in the people who are there every single day with that email and otherwise as well. So again, be consistent with whatever it is you do. And if you make it, people will find it and they will come and follow.
Here, here. Okay, I've got a question, and that's for all the panelists. It's about job satisfaction. How is the job satisfaction in social media and working on these platforms compared to traditional journalism? Are you having fun doing this? More fun than if you were sitting in a newsroom? Who wants to answer that one? No.
I mean,
no.
I have a foot in. No, I have a foot in both. I still work in a newsroom, but I also have my newsletter that I enjoy. And I think what people will probably say is that they like having the editorial freedom to do to cover what they like to cover. There are stories at HuffPost that maybe the audience at HuffPost is not like particularly interested in, but my audience with my newsletter is super interested in, right? So there are stories that I can cover for the newsletter that I enjoy, that I get to write, that I find fun. So I think the biggest thing is probably just the satisfaction of knowing you are your editor, you are the person that makes the judgment call for the stories that you want to write, without necessarily any oversight, which I guess can be a good or a bad thing, depending on what you're doing. But I would say that's probably the biggest thing.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
I would just say I'm not in that space, right? Like I believe that I want to work for someone. This is just like the person that I am. I like it. I'm married to an entrepreneur. It's cute. I'm not into it, right? So fine. I love him, but anyways, but I will say this from this unique vantage point that I have hired influencers before they were called influencers, right? I hired a young woman off of her Snapchat presence and her Snapchat account. Her Snapchat resume is what blew me away. And so we brought her into the Palm Beach Post. I hired a YouTube vlogger with millions and millions of views who was pulling down money every single month from his travel vlog, from being a Haitian American male teaching in South Korea, right? And so I've hired these people. I hired an influencer from like a Hispanic reality TV show. I've been a little crazy. The Palm Beach Post was like, Sam, it's too much, right? It's too much. But here's the thing. They really love the stability. To go back to, I think, Karen, what you were saying earlier, ER, maybe it was you. They love the stability. They were getting to a point in their careers where they wanted to set down roots and had a really hard time seeing how they would be able to do that when the checks fluctuated in the way that they did. And when most of them actually wanted to come home, which I found really, really fascinating. And so one of the things that I talk often about with news leaders who are really representing their local news organizations who say, we can't find people, we can't find diverse talent, we can't retain blase, was never a problem that we had. But we did really, really intentional recruiting for people who had roots in South Florida. And one of the things that we offered them was not just coming back to a teaching newsroom with a really stable salary, but we offered them a chance to like come home. And it really, really worked, right? And so I think that there are also life cycles that we need to be mindful of when we've all been through them, and we're in the throes of life cycles and career cycles now. And how are we hitting on the specific life cycle that could really best serve our community in the way that we're serving them through news information based on how we're recruiting, retaining, and promoting talent. It was something that worked really, really well for us by just looking at years past of like FAU grads, not really intentionally choosing these digital creators at first, but then realizing that those were the skills that we needed in the room, and we needed to be able to model how you can both like be a trusted messenger and be a tried and true and trained journalist. And we did that through that really special talent.
Okay. So you were saying they were having more fun being in the newsroom because of the stability.
The stability, yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, the newsroom was still hard. It was a print newsroom, right? It was 100 and something years old, and so there were still tensions, really interesting tensions. But yeah, they had a good time, and they're still in news today, which I think is great.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Job satisfaction?
Hey, Richard, can I just add one addendum to what I was talking about before? I meant to, in terms of building that following, and yes, I will weigh in on job satisfaction. You're going to make more money in the newsroom and certainly in the station. But so if you can keep it while you're trying to build your social your social platform. But going back to what I was saying with creating your following, a lot of people are giving blues to a platform like TikTok these days. And while TikTok was full of nonsense, and I'm always very quick to tell people who I know and who I work with that almost any social is not really a good place to get your news these days. That may change, and it's trying to change. And one of the places that it is changing is TikTok. One thing about TikTok that sets it apart from everything else is it's a good place to gather followers really quickly. A lot of them tend to be invalid. That's another conversation, but you can gather a lot of people under the tent in a very short period of time. We've done that in the past couple of months, experimenting with it. The trick now is trying to, and somebody mentioned that earlier, transferring that user base from there to say a YouTube or a Substack or something of that nature. So we're working on that now. But keep an eye on it, and don't, because I talk to a lot of my peers, a lot of folks who are, oh, I'm not going to TikTok. Yeah. Don't count it out. Keep an eye on it. Great place to get followers.
Now Phil just put in the chat, he's been banned from TikTok 3 times. We gave up.
Yeah, they're really tough on language and subject. Their algorithm, and it's all done, you know, in the algorithm. The algorithm is not as eloquent as it should be with that. So that it's sometimes you can get banned very quickly. Other times you could speak about people with everything but the child of God and not get out of there. So it's back and forth. It's one of the things we've been experimenting with. So I couldn't tell you which way it's going at this point, but it is a little different than other platforms in that sense. You have to watch what you're doing, read the terms and conditions and the guidelines, and that'll give you a good idea of where to go.
You
Well,
know,
Phil, did you ever figure out why you got banned?
Oh,
Why-
I mean, I got banned. I posted a video of the first time I posted a video of it was a guy drove a car into a dealership, or he drove a car into a store. Nobody was hurt, but they said that it was extreme violence. So first ban, then my other bans were for saying words like gunshot and
Yeah.
suicide, and you
Yep.
can't say suicide, you have to say unalive, and you can't say gunshot, you have to say pew pew.
Pew pew.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I don't know. So I just
It's
gave up. I
crazy.
was like, you know what, I'm done. So I just gave
Yeah.
up.
That has actually changed in the last couple of months, I guess, since
Okay.
Trump came in. I guess they expect the administration to talk a lot of crap, so they've loosened it, seeing as though they're good friends with the new administration, or at least it seems so. So yeah, they've changed some of that, but in that sense, they've also changed some other things. So it's a quickly evolving space. I just recommend that people keep an eye on it and experiment with it if you can, because I think there's some value, and there may be some great value to it as a platform going down the line.
Okay.
I just wanted, sorry, Richard, to add something
do.
that I thought would be important for this group, which is that there are so many great digital first and digital native storytelling initiatives and newsletters, to Phil's point, and just lots of different projects that exist. And so if you were thinking about how do I survive, or how do I shift out of survival and into thriving in this digital age, I would say that you don't actually have to reinvent the wheel, that you can look around and you can see what's working. And, you know, great poets borrow, right? And so what might work for someone that might also work for you. It's one of the things that we see often at API when we convene local news leaders and people bring their playbooks for a live event this, or for a history project that, and people just pluck the playbook right out, right? And so again, I just think there are lots of opportunities for things that are working for people already, that with your expertise for your target audience could also work for you without it needing to always feel like, oh, it's already happening or somebody is already doing it, right? Like you can get inspiration before you move forward. And ideally, you're choosing some inspiration that looks like success or has been successful for other folks, right? As opposed to thinking that in order to do this, you have to blank canvas the whole thing.
Okay. I see Gary Lee there. He's got his new Tulsa local initiative starting up, and congratulations on that. Is there a place for social media and social influencing and what you're trying to do there in Tulsa?
Well, of course, there is. So thank you, Richard. My question would be whether, so my focus, I've got two different newspapers where I'm executive editor. One is the Oklahoma Eagle, which is a historically Black newspaper. I think it's the 9th oldest Black owned newspaper in the country. And the other is a new citywide newspaper, a nonprofit. But the question is whether the recommendations that have been made when they apply to local news, is it just focusing it more narrowly, or are there other recommendations for influencing at a local level?
Okay.
The other recommendation that we didn't share, and I think it's because when we hear the word influencer, we think 100% about people who are doing things online. But the truth is, trusted messengers exist all over our communities. And some of them have a newsletter, and some of them have an Instagram, and some of them are the pastor of the local church, and some of them are the local football coach who has been running summer league for 15 years and was a kid in that community before he started running the football league there, right? And so it's why we're so encouraged by the idea of a trusted messenger within a community and on behalf of news needs for local journalism institutions. And so I would think big, but not so big that your local news organization pulls in influencer partnerships and collaborations of influencers who have audiences that like have been to Tulsa once. That's not going to help you at all, right? And maybe Adriana, you might want to pipe in and talk a little bit about the tools, like the landscaping tools and things like that, that can help folks kind of understand more about the landscape and choosing an influencer who's going to have the greatest possible impact for the mission and for the purpose.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like when I think a lot about these influencer partnerships, I think it really only works great in local. I don't really see as much synergy with national outlets. So I think, some of the biggest things I think about is, um, who these influencers are. They might not have, the biggest following, but they might be just influential in the community. So that's something that I think is really great. A great example that I like to share with folks is I do some work with Verite News that's run out of New Orleans, and they actually do a really interesting news series on TikTok and Instagram called Porch Poppin', where they have two members of the community. They're not what you would consider influencers per se. They probably have a few hundred or maybe 1,000 followers on social media, but they're two guys that really are known in the community, and they basically take all of Verite's reporting and they turn it into 60-second digest for TikTok. And I love that partnership because it kind of shows you, people see them and they're like, oh, it's EJ. We know him, it's DC. And like, it feels like that connection, and it feels like they're telling news to their community in a way that makes sense. So I think it's important to kind of explore partnerships like that too. That's not just, oh, here's an influencer, just trying to tell me all the information, but maybe just having someone who's a really great community member just take over your TikTok and make a few videos telling the news. I think there's a lot of really simple but really effective ways that this work can be done.
Yeah, that's right. And you're reminding me, Adriana, of the Green Lines work with their local comedian, which is another really great opportunity. And we have seen even in some social impact studies in influencer partnerships that influencers who kind of categorize themselves as humor or comedians have higher levels of engagement. They're also the most expensive to book. And so there is something to be said about humor and news and information. I think that like when you are disarmed through the laughter, you are more open to receiving maybe some of what you might need, or at least being able to hear, especially across difference. And so that's really interesting. In one of the API newsrooms, public source, the influencers that they used were a part of their community essayist program. And so where a lot of news organizations have opinion sections, they have a community voices section. And instead of going back out deeper into Pittsburgh to find other trusted messengers, they realized that they had trusted messengers right there. They just have only been sharing thoughts through this very traditional mechanism of writing what is essentially a community essay or editorial. And so they partnered with them to share their election guide to inform voters in Pittsburgh ahead of the presidential election. And these were like it was like the senior vice president of the local YMCA, right? This was like an executive director of another nonprofit. Like these were the people that they then worked with to do influencer style video content on LinkedIn and on Instagram to get the word out. And so, yes, influencers, but also so much bigger than that. In many ways, I think you might be able to say, hey, Sam, I think I'm actually a trusted messenger for my community, and you probably are.
Okay. I see Eric Tate there and Bob Anthony from New York. They've got the Media Watch. I was wondering whether there's a role for any of this in when the work that you guys do and talking about the media every week and analyzing what's good and what's bad.
Guess I'll let
You have to unmute.
Do you want to go first, Eric?
No, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I like what I've heard here about owning your brand and making sure that you take your followers with you, and making sure that you always have something for yourself in this road on the web. When I was I wrote my first tech articles in the 80s, but when I left the newspaper, I always had this idea of writing a newspaper column, syndicating it, a computer column. So I did that for a while, called it the Paper PC. When the internet showed up, I heard about this platform called Blogger, and I figured, well, why don't I write on that, distribute it that way? It evolved to WordPress, and then it finally evolved to Substack, which is what I'm using now. As far as influencers are concerned, I'm glad what Sam was saying about vetting them. That's extremely important. I'm a journalist, and so are you, Richard. You know about vetting stories for continuity, for accuracy, for just making sure that they understand opinion from fact and attribution. I think you said something about that, Sam. There's space for us to be good at this, but we have to be careful at what we do. And Eric and I try to be careful with what we do on our bi-weekly public access TV show, Media Watch. Eric can say a bit more, but for me, it's all about accuracy. If you're going to be on any platform, be accurate or don't be there.
Here, here.
Yeah, to pick up on what Bob said. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, to pick up on what Bob said, the accuracy is paramount for us because we're not shy about calling out what we see might be wrong with what's going on, even as we still try to function as journalists. So back in the first iteration of the current White House occupant, we were not shy about saying that we thought this person was basically a tool of the normal adversary of our country. And we were not shy about saying, this man doesn't stretch the truth, this man lies. But we needed to make sure we could point out where he was lying and why it was inaccurate, whatever it was he was saying. And so when we say we call the show Media Watch, we're not shy about saying, well, why is the rest of the journalistic profession not being accurate about calling this person out for these aberrant lies? And so, look, I think Media Watch is as much a on-air column, right, because of that approach, as it is an attempt to hold the rest of the media to accuracy. And you guys can watch it. Richard, you can judge it, and you can let us know if we're functioning as an accurate and a fair column and a good arbiter of what's going on.
All right. How about Gilbert Baylon in Chicago, editor at WBEZ? How does this all strike you and what you're doing there at Chicago Public Media?
Well, I had a question that I'm WBEZ, the NPR affiliate in Chicago. We explored using some influencers during the Democratic National Convention, but what we found out was that they wanted a pretty steep price to be engaged.
Oh.
So we backed off, mainly because of cost. And these were, some of them were local, some of them were people in the political world. I just, what's for we in the quote legacy media, what's worth the investment of engaging folks and what's realistic? Because they wanted to be paid. So, and we had a budget that we just couldn't match. So I'm just curious about people who've tried to hire folks, or is there a way to make it reasonable for people who have limited budgets, like public media?
Yeah, I mean, there are trade opportunities that you can certainly pursue, and there are news organizations who are absolutely pursuing those opportunities. So, for example, there's a lower rate for some influencer work happening, but there are newsrooms that are like retrofitting abandoned parts of their newsrooms to become like creator labs for these local trusted messengers, right? And so there's a value add for them that they're getting a studio, it's going to feel state of the art, there's going to be, you know, and so maybe that constitutes paying a little less, right? There are people who are doing influencer partnerships that really equate to influencer marketing. We have done the thing and reported the thing, and now we just need to tell you, like, we just need you to tell your people about the thing, where influencers want more money. They also want more money if you want them to hit different platforms. And so if you're working with an influencer and you want them to hit Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, they're going to charge you per platform because typically they aren't doing what news organizations are doing, which is maybe doing one vertical video and then running it across all these platforms. But typically influencers, because of the brand that they have built and because of the community expectations that they have set, they are doing authentic storytelling across the platform each and every time. And that takes time and it takes money. And so if you're looking at an influencer as to equate them to a freelancer, and then what is your freelance budget, it could potentially change the conversation, just something to look at. But Gilbert, to your point, what we have found is that the ranges are bananas. In our cohort, the range was, as you're gonna laugh, but in our cohort, and which again is like just 6 newsrooms. So it's not like, this is all still very early on, right? But 6 newsrooms, the range was $250 to $2,500 across 6 newsrooms, paying an influencer to essentially be a marketing extension. Here is our voter guide. Share the voter guide with your communities. The lower end of that was definitely the local influence, like the local trusted messengers who donated their time and were given an honorarium. The higher end of that was a national level influencer with like a very large Spanish language community, really supporting a newsroom who was wanting to kind of break through the misinformation during the election. On the other side of that conversation, because again, it's hard to find these numbers, is another report. I'm going to use the social impact report from Social Current, which had the same ranges, guys. It was $850 for like student athlete, quote unquote, influencers, ranging all the way up to like $3,600. So the ranges are big, which doesn't help you at all, really. But what it does mean is you should consider, what am I adding to the influencer and the work that they're doing? Am I adding anything? How am I making sure that I'm paying them for their time? And what is my reasoning behind that, right? So like a newsroom that I'm consulting right now, we're talking about all of the different pieces of work that a digital creator does, how we're kind of mapping that through Glassdoor rates, right? And then coming up with what feels like a really right flat rate for the community that they're in. So there are ways that you can do this that go beyond Googling or asking ChatGPT what the rate should be, right? So that at least that way you're getting in at the ground floor and you're treating them as fairly as you can afford to treat them, right? As you're kind of growing and experimenting in the space.
Okay. Now, Felix Contreras of NPR. After the end of our last roundtable, Felix said, why aren't you talking more about social media? Well, Felix, we're here talking about social media. What do you think?
I think that it's very helpful because the last the last grouping was was very influential. I mean, very informative, right? And what we were talking about. But I got the feeling that there wasn't a lot of interaction with the with social media and the internet and stuff like that. So this is I'm just so impressed with all the folks that you gathered as experts and as guides, because it really is helpful. And I can also I understand it almost feels overwhelming, when you're trying to take on this stuff, especially if you try to do it on your own. But yeah,
well, how does this affect the work that you do?
I'm in a weird spot, because I work for NPR, I work for an established media organization. We developed our podcast to be strictly an online product 15 years ago. And it was specifically because, Latinos were over-indexing on mobile products way back when. So when we developed the show, we knew we weren't going to get any NPR stations to take our show. So we developed it as an online show. And then over the years, then just the opposite, over the years, we started offering it to radio stations for free. And, I think we're up to like 180 stations now. So how it impacts us, we still have a strong online presence. We have people in the newsroom, in our music newsroom, who help with the word out on social media, all the social media platforms of when we do a podcast. But we're also connected to the Tiny Desk concert series, so that also helps us promote our brand, the Alt Latino brand and the NPR Music brand in general. And there's no way to anticipate something like that on how this Tiny Desk thing just took off. We've been doing it probably just a little bit longer than we've been doing a podcast, and so within the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, it's become mega, mega, mega big. So then it just carries us along. It's like, I'm in the inner tube riding that thing down the hill, man. And I think we all are in that newsroom, right? So, but that again, that thing exists online. It's strictly a YouTube product. It's strictly an Instagram product. It's got its own life. So I don't know that I don't know how you would create that. We couldn't have sit around a table or sit around a bar one night. We're drinking a couple beers and say, let's do this, let's do this. It just sort of happened. It was very organic. So I think the thing is just to hold on and try to go for the ride.
All right. We haven't talked about podcasts and YouTube in this discussion. I want to ask our panelists, how do they fit into all of this? Are they considered vehicles for social media and social media influencers?
Oh, well, I'll say one thing about this before I have to leave. I'm actually still at work right now.
Okay.
But I did want to say that I came across a number. It was a survey done by Acast, which is like a audio kind of like outlet. It's an audio company, and they found that podcasters are the most trusted media personalities among U.S. consumers, and I think this was a survey conducted like 2 years ago. I think the number was 65% of consumers are like, they look to podcasts like now then that number is much higher than obviously it was before. And obviously we saw how podcasters sort of swung the conversations during the election. So it's one of those things where it's super important as we move forward, how people interact with podcasts and what's going on with that. But I did want to just share that. I just wanted to share that number with you all before I get kicked out of this hotel that I'm in. Yeah, but thank you all so much. This was great.
Thank you. Let me ask Meredith this question, since she wrote a book about Black Twitter. How important is it for journalists to be on these social media platforms?
Well, it's essential. What the social networking platforms do is allow the work that is produced, whether it's in legacy media or on digital only platforms, is allowed to be amplified from place to place to place. And so people can take your work and they can repost it, and it's a lot easier to connect with an audience that you may not have known was there if those people can find you on the platforms, right? It's the reason that we're not starting, we've been doing it for a while now, but you see people's Twitter handles, and I'm always going to call it Twitter. I'm never going to refer to it as anything else. People's Twitter handles, their IG handles, their TikTok handles included as part of their byline or at the bottom of their story with a tagline or what have you, because folks need to know how to find you. Back in the day, it was email. And when we think about what has happened in terms of the threats and harassment that companies don't want to have to deal with in terms of monitoring their employees' emails, we've taken a lot of emails away, made it a lot harder for people to be spammed in that way. But we've left up these social media handles, which it's still relatively difficult to do the same kind of large scale harassment and campaigns with folks on those social media platforms, because you've got external algorithms that are paying attention to the kind of activity that someone's getting. So I think it's essential. It's in everyone's best bet, and you don't have to be everywhere. I'm trying to remember who said that earlier, but I know Elliot mentioned making sure that you're somewhere regularly. The same is true with your preferred social networking platform. You don't have to be on everything, right? Figure out what platform you want people to find you on and stay there. And if you feel like, it's coming that you might need to move, like we had that blip where TikTok was gone for a few hours and it came back, knowing that someone could find you on another platform, fairly easy to do. So, I have my Twitter account. Unfortunately, I'm no longer able to get into my old Twitter account, but I'm still there. I created another one and I tweet myself every single time. So if someone's looking for me, they can still find me there. And that's a way to get directly to me. And then we can connect from there and, connect on email or whatever else it is.
Okay. You mentioned this online harassment, and that's now that I think about it, that's an elephant in the room, because this has been a problem for women, particularly, not only in the United States but around the world. How does this figure into all the work that we've been talking about, online harassment and ending it, or at least subduing it enough so that people feel comfortable being on these social media platforms?
I'll speak to it really quickly and then defer, and I hope someone else will weigh in, not just, panelists. I think Sam and I are the last two panelists standing, but some other folks on the call. We know that particularly not just with women, but women of color, Black women in specific, face harassment at levels that are outsized for other groups on social networking platforms. And the thing about the harassment on these platforms is that it's just more visible than it used to be, because for all of us who have worked in newsrooms, especially folks who worked in white-owned corporate newsrooms, you know that you got mail, you got letters, you got calls. I can remember when I wrote a weekly column for the Tallahassee Democrat, I could guarantee that on Monday, my column ran on a Friday. On Monday, there was going to be a guy calling me a nigger every single Monday. I knew he would be there. And so what's different is that I was the only person who had to deal with that when I was working for legacy media. Now with social networking platforms, more people can see it and it can scale at a different level, but it's just bringing into the open what we already know about the hazards of this job.
Okay. Sam, did you want to answer that?
Well, I think it's just important to remember that if people are telling you that it's happening online, it probably is happening. And how are we protecting our people in a way that shows quick action is important. And there have been a lot of different strategies, but like the online space is scary. It's been scary for a long time. The trolls are louder than anyone, right? And so there's a lot that I think could change across the cultures of our newsroom to further uplift and protect our journalists. In addition to kind of knowing what you need to know before you need to know it, which is typically the problem, right? Like you don't really know what you should do digital safety wise until your digital safety is in question. And then all of a sudden there's this like reactionary mechanism, right? And that seems to be the case. And if that is the case for anybody in this room, it's like, yeah, it's just, I get it. Like the news cycle is relentless. Your newsroom is stretched thinner than it's ever been before, and it keeps falling in the priority line. Then at least know where you need to go, right? Like from PEN America to IWMF, to the DART Center, there are lots of different organizations that can help support you, support your journalist, when these attacks inevitably happen. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Carol, you had a question in the chat. What's your question?
Oh, I was just curious, because given everything that's been said, if anyone has any favorites as a news influencers that you're particularly paying attention to right now, if anyone's willing to share that.
It's a good question. And I can't remember who asked about the mapping and the vetting, but one of the things that we recommend newsrooms to do is ask their journalists who the influencers are. That's a really great way to start your influencer map, especially if you're in a local newsroom or serving a very targeted community, because we're all kind of following these people. One that I really like, Carol, is I think her handle is Life with Ryan on Instagram. This is Ryan Shepard, who is a former journalist turned foodie turned chef and breast cancer survivor and mom. The news that she shares out is not typically Atlanta based at all, though she is based in Atlanta. But she shares a lot of mental health information, maternal health information, news information, psychological information that I find really, really helpful and important as a news influencer, to which she would never, ever in a million years call herself that.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Roger, did you want to have another question about that harassment? Roger Witherspoon.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for hosting this. I'm curious as to how is the harassment that you get from your online presence different from the types of harassment, phone calls, mail, and just and comments and threats when we were on the scene in the old days? Is it just more of it, or is it difference in quality?
So I've only, I mean, I haven't really experienced it, right? So I can talk to you about some of what I have been told. For example, that it just seems to be incredibly pervasive and everywhere. And so because so much of our lives are online anyway, how we're connecting with our grandparents who are living in another state, how we're connecting with siblings who we don't live near anymore, plus doing our job, right? You know, one of the first things that happens, I think, when a journalist is experiencing online harassment is that their phone is taken away, because it's so hard not to look, right? And it's so hard to not feel that you have been invaded because the phone belongs to you, right? And it feels like this personal space and it goes with you everywhere. And so it's one of the tactics that folks use. But so far as language and the scale, yeah, I mean, Dr. Clark, you can definitely speak more to that. I see you in the chat.
No, I was just gonna add that the scale, I think, is the thing, and really the contagion, right? So people see, you think about when someone has really made you mad online and you've gone to their page to see what their page looks like and you see the comments, and there might be something that one person comments that resonates with you, and you add your comment to that. Now, I'm not saying you're, harassing people, but you are contributing to the discussion. Harassment works in that same way. Like, someone will decide that they're angry at a particular person online one day, and then all of a sudden, other people who can see that conversation jump on. I'll give you an example from my own experience. I was having a conversation with another professor and brought up something about, it was about students and grade grubbing. And I made a comment about how I handle that. And someone saw it, they leapt on it, they talked about how unfair I was.
What is grade grubbing?
Grade grubbing is when you earned a C, but you're asking me for an A. Or you earned an 89, which is a B, and you're asking me for a 92, which is an A. So getting in there and begging for the grade that was not earned. The way online harassment in that case works, someone took that conversation, they took the thing that I said on Twitter, they reposted it to Reddit, they wrote a headline for it, which was not at all what I said, nor was it anything that I had done. And then on the Reddit forum for the school where I was working, people started posting information about me. They pulled my pictures from across the web. They posted how to get in contact with me. They posted information from my boss. So they're networking this harassment, that it's not just one person who's responding to me. It's not just one person who's sending me an email or a message. Now it becomes a group project, essentially. And that's what you see happening online when people are harassed.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay, anybody else before we...
hey, Richard, you asked a moment ago of people that we'd recommend in terms of quote unquote influencers.
Yeah, Carol recommended that.
Yeah, two suggestions. One person is somebody who's not really in the digital space much anymore, but she was very influential early on, and I believe she's been in this forum from time to time. Danielle Belton, of course, the
Oh,
former
yes.
editor of HuffPost. But before she did HuffPost, she did a very popular blog called The Black Snob. Was that it?
The Black Snob, right?
Black Snob. I believe it is still archived somewhere. I recommend that if you haven't read it, go looking for it and kind of trace it over a couple of years. It was very compelling, and she had a clear voice through that really drew you back each and every, I forget how often she posted, but she was clearly one of the leaders in that space early on. More contemporarily is a young lady, young Black woman. I don't think she's out of her 20s yet, who is oh gosh, on YouTube. Oh, her name escapes me. It was just there a second ago. I'll have to put it in the chat because it's a senior moment, folks. There you saw it. But she's not a news. She's not a news influencer. She's not a news blogger. She's vlogs on YouTube, and she's very consistent. She's been there for about 4 or 5 years. And what I want you to focus in with her is her style, her personality. Not that it's yours. It's not yours. It's not mine. It's not anybody else's. She's just who she is. And as much as I've tried over the years, I can't take my eye off of her. I keep going back, and every now and then I'll go, oh, this is just nonsense. I don't really want to stay here today.
Talking
But
about Jeanette Reyes?
Huh?
Jeanette Reyes that you're talking about?
No. If I had the time, I could look it up very quickly in my list, but I'll have to post it. Kelly Stamps.
Right.
Kelly Stamps. So Google or search for, can't Google it, in YouTube. Next time you're in YouTube, search for Kelly Stamps and take a look and just get a sense of how she does what she does. It's not for you. The idea is to understand that these people make a connection through something that's just very organic with them. And if you identify that which is within you, make it available, people will come. Just that simple.
Okay. And I'll also point out that those who are fans of some of the people on television, such as Joy Reid and Don Lemon, that they are now posting very frequently on the internet, on these social platforms, and so those might be some people you might want to consider also. All right, anybody else before we conclude? Any closing thoughts? And also, we haven't heard from. No? Okay, they should remain listeners rather than talkers.
I'll introduce myself really fast. My name is
Yes.
Jewel Justice. I'm a multimedia journalist, photographer, and writer. And right now I'm a fellow for the South Jersey Information Equity Project. And I don't have anything in particular to add. Just wanted to introduce myself and just say that I appreciate the thoughtful conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm new to this, as you can probably tell, but I learned a lot and I appreciate everyone's thoughts.
Anybody else? Hazel, you haven't said anything.
Oh, hi, everybody. Yeah, I've just been fascinated. I've kind of been, it's hot in my mother's house and I've been kind of dozing a little bit, just nodding, but I've caught, I hope, everything, all the salient points. And one of the things I just cannot figure out, you know, I've had my Newswire now for 15 years. And I just can't figure out why I'm so afraid of social media. I will not post on Twitter. I mean, I have a Twitter account and an X account. I follow it, Instagram. Every once in a while, I'll post on Facebook. But listening to you all, it's obvious that if I did, my subscribership on my Newswire would be probably even greater because we do some good stuff and we have some great columnists. I think Barbara Reynolds was on just a second ago. But for some reason, I'm like this, you know, when it comes to social media, and I've got to learn what that is, you know, because I'm hearing such inspiring stories about how successful it can be. But maybe it's what Meredith and some other people were alluding to, the harassment, because I am unapologetically Black. That's a part of my motto. And I don't want to come on Monday morning and see the N-word maybe that's it. I don't know. I'm not afraid of it. I've been called the N-word 3 times to my face in my career.
Hazel, Hazel, can I suggest something to you? And
Yes, you may.
This is just from my experience. Hopefully Blue Sky will be like this when they mature and finally figure out and put all the pieces together, but they're still trying to work things out. But it tends to be a platform where you're interacting with the choir. You're preaching to the choir. Facebook is generally the same thing if you pay attention to your settings and make sure that the people who join you as your friends are truly your friends. These are just people that are within your circle. And so that so you'll know that when you post something, it's going to a friendly audience, and it will come back in like ways. You won't necessarily have to attract people from the outside because you're just talking to your friends and your friends are talking to you. But it's imperative, and this is where the rub comes in. It's imperative that you look in your settings and they are voluminous. You have to sit down and spend some time with it and look at every line. And I want this and I don't want that. I only want to post to friends. I don't want it going out to the world. I don't want the world coming to me. There's a whole lot of stuff in there. Spend time with the settings and make sure that it's adjusted for what you want and for your expectations. And I think the results that you get will be a lot better than, say, if you go on Twitter, and I agree with Meredith, I'm not calling it anything else. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's Twitter. I can still search it that way on Google and it comes up. But it's not the Wild West like Twitter or Instagram or certainly TikTok. It can be a little bit more friendly, but it's a little hard to understand. So spend some time with it and bend it to your will. And I think you'll have
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're just with friends at that point.
Thank you. But let me just add one more thing. I want to just say this. In my 15th year, I would say that starting my own newswire, jumping out there on my own, was the best, absolutely best decision I ever made. And I'm still loving it and still surviving off of it. Could do better, but I'm still surviving.
All right, here. Phil Haslanger, do you have anything to add to the conversation? What is your reaction to what you've heard?
Yeah, so I'm here in Madison, Wisconsin. One of the hats I wear is I'm on the advisory board of the University of Wisconsin Center for Journalism Ethics, as is Jill Geisler, who was here earlier.
Yes.
And our conference this fall is going to be looking at, I call it ethics schmethics, but we'll have a more serious title. But what do you do with ethics in an era where the media has become so fragmented, but there's so many different approaches? How do we find that? I really appreciated the post that Sam put up about thinking about ethics with influencers. We may be back in touch. Heard a lot of really good ideas here tonight, so thank you for letting me sit in.
Very good. Thanks for being here. Janine Cummings, our photographer for the evening. Can you hear us, Janine?
Yes, I can. How you doing today, everybody?
All right. What is on your mind after hearing all these people?
You know, it's interesting. You know, when I think of influencers, I'm thinking about people always selling online, and I've also heard of influencers being, you know, like journalists that weren't journalists. And so hearing it from the perspective tonight, it gave me another way of seeing how you can influence people, so to speak, correctly with information as opposed to dis and misinformation. So I found that kind of interesting to hear that tonight from another perspective, because that, you know, again, you know, it's like, what was it, Paris Hilton at one time, and those kind of folks that was just trying to sell stuff and put a product out there. And but I've also been hearing about, let's say, people from the right that consider themselves journalists, but they really are not, but they're influencers. So it was just interesting to hear the perspective I got tonight regarding that.
Very good. Okay. That's good to hear that.
Thank
Darren
you.
Snyder, how about you? Are you there? Okay, you must have stepped away.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else do we overlook?
I'm here. Can you
Oh,
hear
you're
me?
there. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, what do you have to say?
Well, somebody earlier was talking about, we're in moments, career arcs, and things of that nature. So I've been on both sides: independent contractor, full-time journalist, full-time professor. Now about to be back into the, I don't know, full-time media is appealing because of the every 2 week direct deposit. The independent journalist life, I enjoyed that, even though you don't have the consistent flow. But I think it is important to try to figure out how to do something with the social media. I never got a huge following on social media, and I always felt like it should be more, but I don't know, just never really took off. So I would put my stuff on there, and just out of principle. And I guess sooner or later, probably sooner, I'll start generating some more content when the professorship kind of trails off. So this has been helpful, encouraging.
Where are you doing your professorship?
Well, I'm currently on a 1-year appointment at Howard full time, but that's ending in May. So if anybody out there got any leads for some work, hit a brother up. Yeah. So I'm
goodness gracious.
I hear you. Okay, let me see if Toriano is still here. Toriano Porter in Kansas City, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. What you got to say?
Fascinating. Everything that you guys talked about tonight was fascinating, and a lot of these things I've been trying to do with my social media presence. One thing that I've learned is if people are going to buy into you as a news source, they're going to subscribe to your paper, they have to believe in you, they have to trust in you, you have to establish rapport with them. So what I've tried to do is use coffee as a universal language. So a lot of my social media posts has to do with coffee. I go to different coffee shops because I work remotely most of the time. And I'm connected with people through the love language of coffee, right? And then consistently, when I write my pieces,
Wait, the love language of coffee. I just have to stop and think about that one. Go ahead.
It's a universal love language. I've sat down, I'm an opinion writer, guys, for the Kansas City Star's editorial board. And I've sat down with people who did not agree with my columns and reached out to me via email and sent hate mail, what you call it. And I've been able to sit down with them over coffee and discover that we have way more things in common than we do not in common. But my point in all that is I've used that on every social media channel that I have. What are you talking about? LinkedIn, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever it is called these days. I'm on everything but Snapchat. I don't do no dancing on TikTok, though. I don't do no dancing. But I'm a serious newsman. But I've used the social media tools to draw people into buying into me as a trusted source. And when I want to promote my stories or promote my editorials or columns, I don't have to keep begging for people to subscribe. It's just part of the branding now. So everything you guys said tonight, the presenters was great. People that's chimed in has been great. So thank you for inviting me, Richard. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for being here. Hope you come back.
Hey, one more. You guys can find me. You guys can find me on all the social media channels at Toriano Porter. That's me. TORIANOPORTER. And maybe we could connect over coffee.
All right.
Love language of
Digital
coffee.
even.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey,
Jackie
Richard.
Green, have you
Yes. Fascinating topic as always. Really appreciate all the panelists coming on tonight, joining us to do this. And I was writing some notes there about excited, fascinating, and Richard and I had a conversation earlier about how to approach this, and part of that conversation was the future of traditional journalism and traditional media, and so I was listening to figure that out and said, there is hope here. It seems like there is a combination of some of the traditional things, but this is moving in a different direction. And I also agree with Janine about the term influencer. When you first hear that, it has a different connotation here. But once how it was explained tonight, it's changed my whole thinking about when I hear that word now, how I'll think about it and the people who are producing things. So thank you. I really appreciate all of your time, your attention here, and we hope to join you on another one of the roundtables. And at the very end, Richard, I'd like to show that cartoon you put up and something else.
Give me the wall card cartoon.
Yeah.
Well, the context of that one is that you know, the times we live in and the different approaches some people are taking to that, and some people say, well, let's just work around it or let's give in. And Walt Carr, who was at our roundtable on cartoonists a couple of years ago, is now 92 years old. And this is his perspective from his generation. It's nothing about, oh, well, let's give in here. Maybe we'll get something down the line. I mean, he's old school, and there you go.
Yeah, and just another topic too, that we were here April last year, and we hosted another conversation. And would you believe that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
It's a continuing topic, isn't it?
Yes. That was my point, that, you know, April 11th, we were having this conversation, and we're still having a similar conversation this year.
Right.
Who would have thought at this time that conversation would even be as prevalent as it is? We all thought when we had it last year that was a short-term thing. And by summer, no one would be talking about this.
Yes.
Here we are. But thank you so much. I learned a lot about influencers, but also how to deal with social media in a different way, how to think differently about it, how to merge it with traditional media, and some thoughts about how we go forward.
Here, here. One more thing about Walt Carr's cartoon. I think that started with a conversation of the question being asked, who will represent journalists in this conversation about DEI? We haven't heard very much from the journalism community about what needs to be done and what should be done. And I think that's another thing we can take away from Walt Carr's message to us. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thanks to those on Facebook and those who will be watching later on YouTube. There will be a transcript, a printout made of the chat room that will be emailed to all those for whom we have email addresses. And Bing didn't say anything, but I think that she wants to put something in the chat. That's good enough. We're 4 minutes past our time. I want to thank everybody else. And if you have anything, we have nothing in particular scheduled for April. So if anybody has any good ideas as to a good discussion topic, please pass them along. So with that having been said, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Glad to see you all again, and let's do it all again next time.
Thanks for the invite, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Maybe over a cup of coffee.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
So long, everybody, and stay well.
Take
care, stay safe.
Indeed. All right.